This is StoryRobot. Welcome to r/NuclearRevenge. Our first story of today is, take away our heat and electricity during the winter? Enjoy losing your job and paying thousands. I regretfully got an apartment with, what is in my opinion, the worst landlord ever. This man, I will call Entitled Beep or Entitled Dad, has the audacity to call himself a good person in court. Let me fill you in. I got an apartment shortly after being released from prison. Happy that someone was going to give me a chance to improve my life. This was clearly not the case. All was well for the first few months, then winter hit and the heat went out. It took 3 days to get Entitled Dad to even answer his phone. By that time his voicemail was full of complaints from his freezing cold tenants. He told me the law gave him reasonable time to fix it. We went 2 more weeks with no heat, using our stoves and camping in the kitchen in our respective apartments. When Entitled Dad got his electricity bill, he attempted to raise the rent on the apartments. Obviously he was not allowed by the city, so he refused to pay his electricity bill, thus denying all of us heat at all. This is where my OCD kicked in and I went full research mode. I studied every law in regards to federal, state and city landlord-tenant laws and rights. I found so many violations it was no longer funny but scary. I studied building code, I studied the condition of all of his apartments. This was easier due to the fact I was either friends with his tenants or had gone there to repair damages caused by frozen pipes and electrical outlets failing due to shoddy wiring and so forth. Entitled Dad had pissed off all of his tenants. Every last one was pissed to the point where they wanted to testify against him in court but couldn't due to the financial hardships the living conditions we were in had been causing. I formulated a plan to get him to repair the buildings he owned. But Entitled Dad had his own plan. January 2nd at 2 a.m., I was awoken by the smoke detectors in the whole building going off. I quickly ran to the back hall because no smoke was in my apartment yet, but I was on the top floor. I opened the door and was greeted by a thick wall of smoke. I quickly ran downstairs after shouting for my GF at the time to get out of the house quick. I pounded on every door and screamed fire. I got as many people as possible to evacuate, but the floor with the fire no one was answering and to my knowledge contained children. So I panicked. At this point the fire department was there and began breaking in doors. I evacuated. After the fire was out and the investigation had started, I witnessed Entitled Dad give the tenant of that apartment's sister an envelope containing an undisclosed amount of cash which was visible to anyone nearby. 2 weeks later, the results were released. Arson. The tenant had used hairspray to start the fire and hid the evidence in a hole she punched into the wall. The very person who had been given money by the landlord. Ironically, she was the only tenant who had paid rent in the whole building because she had started moving in 2 days prior. I had not known she was now a tenant and her sister and kids had moved out the day before. I looked at Entitled Dad and told him, I know what he had done. And I was not going to rest until he lost all his buildings. I then began asking his tenants for their stories about their interaction with Entitled Dad. This is where things got real. He had been accused of everything from ripping off employees, theft, grand theft auto, bank fraud, and so much more. I formulated a new plan. I sucked up to him and made it known I am a computer tech. Entitled Dad had a few broken computers and some printer and network issues. I was in. We worked a deal on payment for back rent. I knew he was not good for his word, but it was all part of the plan. Once I got his passwords and logins, I copied his entire HDD to my portable one. I copied all emails in his business account and printed his financial records on my Wi-Fi printer which was next door. After I fixed his computers and network, I then went home to review my newfound evidence. It was enough. More than enough. I contacted code enforcement with all of the violations of code for every building, including the illegal electrical installation in his new office without permits or even an electrician. He was immediately investigated. That night, I found a 7-day notice to quit on my door. My roommate was worried, but I filled him in on the plan. Remember I studied all those laws and rights? Well, we get to court and I open with, Your Honor, I have proof of a clear violation of the Warranty of Habitability Act. The eviction was thrown out and he was forced to repair my apartment with me still in it immediately. The next month I was given another eviction notice. Still he is losing money due to the fact I was teaching his tenants landlord-tenant rights and the laws associated with it. Entitled Dad kept losing his court dates and kept being told to fix stuff and was continuously fined by the courts and the code enforcement. He was sinking fast. Back to that fire, the woman living there was arrested for arson and charged with 2 counts due to the accidental electrical fire on New Year's Day turned out to be ruled intentional. So the hairspray was in reality attempt 2. He was under investigation for conspiracy to arson and other charges. I wasn't done yet. We went to court again for my non-payment of rent. I won again based on the Landlord Retaliation Act because I had contacted code enforcement and can prove this blatant retaliation, and the judge didn't even listen to Entitled Dad. Needless to say, spending the winter without heat took a toll on us tenants. We bought electric heaters and informed the power company that the landlord had shut off all the power to all his building and was requiring the tenants to pay for their own power. Well, apparently his illegal wiring caught up to him. He had wired apartments to run off each other, and the common areas were now attached to wiring in every apartment. This put entitled dad in a rough position, as local law says it's the landlord's responsibility to supply power to all common areas. This means his shoddy workmanship and illegal wiring prevents him from legally disconnecting the power. The power company turned on all the power and locked his ability to shut it off until the wiring of common areas was repaired and separated from the apartments. This would cost thousands. Thousands we knew he didn't have. Entitled dad was panicking. He kept losing in court, people were legally withholding rent, he couldn't shut off services, and the fines were debilitating. He kept blaming his tenants and refused to repair things. One by one the buildings were condemned, and entitled dad was required to pay for relocation of his tenants by law. Well, he didn't. He couldn't. He was arrested for attempting to sell 3 buildings the city confiscated from him and for selling one that was condemned. Entitled dad got what he deserved. He lost every building he owned, got charged with all kinds of fraud, and was investigated for other crimes I am still unaware of. But I wasn't done. He caused a lot of suffering. I gave his financial records to the IRS with all the internal memos and everything I got from his computers. Also, I provided the local authorities and code enforcement with the same things. Entitled dad was so screwed. I have since gotten a new apartment, and everything he owned has been taken by the city, state, and IRS. I have not seen entitled dad in 3 years, and all of his properties have been bought by someone new, repaired, and have all new tenants who are happy with their new landlords. The old tenants got better places with decent landlords. And what about our wonderful entitled beep? He is serving multiple sentences for the crimes he has committed and is already not getting out anytime soon, yet the investigations are not done and the charges keep coming. Entitled dad is somewhere in some prison regretting meeting this tenant. Moral? Don't be an entitled dad unless you want to meet the moral enforcer. Our final story of today is, never underestimate a child's ability for revenge. When I was much younger, I was molested by a few different people, on different occasions. One almost broke my spirit, but I got my revenge in the end. Being little, and in the 4th grade, there wasn't much I could do physically, but I bided my time. After being held out of school by my grandfather, who told me to put on a dress that was much too small and wanted me to sit on his lap. I did neither, but a degree of molestation occurred anyway. I felt dirty, degraded, but most of all I was pissed. I threw myself even farther into my schoolwork and waited, tick tick tick. My father, who worked nights, was asleep in his room before his shift started. My grandfather and I were in the living room watching television, he in his recliner and I on the couch. He started making noises like a puppy here, hopping on his stomach, forcing the air from his lungs, and vomited into the small trash can next to his chair, then grabbed his chest and looked at me. Confused, I asked if he was okay, and all he could say was, ung. I knew from CPR training from the Girl Scouts that he was having a heart attack. I sat on the couch and held eye contact with him, smiling. I waited, and waited, and waited, until he fell unconscious, and it was likely too late for anything to be done before getting my dad, and telling him what was happening in the living room. Dad called 911, and the ambulance came to take the old man away, and I was sent to the neighbor's house, while Dad followed the ambulance in his own vehicle. The old beep died in the hospital, and I had to play the tearful granddaughter at the funeral. I guess I wasn't a very good Girl Scout after all. Thank you for watching. Error. Problem detected. Not enough subscribers. Please subscribe, like, and comment.